Welcome to this business event. We're basically talking about the zerocarbonbusiness.uk platform and support for how to improve your whole grasp of the energy and climate issue. We've got a range of speakers today, and we especially want to get your views on the zerocarbonbusiness.uk web platform and how it can help you as businesses. So first of all, we're just going to do some brief introductions around your speakers. You'll notice this is being done in a meeting format today rather than a webinar format. And that's because we really do want to get your participation later. And it's much easier to get a chat going in a meeting format. But we obviously ask you to stay on mute during the presentation sections, please, so we don't get dogs, cats, horses, and everything else butting in. Apologies if my dog barks. If my dog barks, I'll mute myself and let someone else take over the chairing until my dog stops barking. So we ask you to stay on mute during the presentations, and there will be two opportunities for you to start to have the conversation. If you want to put conversation in chat, that's absolutely brilliant. If you want to put questions that you want me to come to you about in the chat as well later on, please put that in, try and flag that up really clearly. That's a question and who it might be for, and then we'll try and pick that up specifically later. Okay. So without further ado, let me first of all introduce myself and then give our panel the chance to introduce themselves. My name's Miranda Barker. I'm the Chief Executive of East Lancashire Chamber of Commerce, and we do a lot in the low carbon space. Joining us soon, I hope, will be our low carbon sustainability director, Sykes. And we run a chamber low carbon program that works with general businesses to decarbonise their operations and efforts across Lancashire. And we also run Red Cat, which is a low carbon technologies innovation organisation, which is just developing now. And if you're in the Lancashire area, you might already see some information about that. So let me pass on and first of all ask Chris from Broadway to introduce himself, please.
Hello, I'm Chris Taylor and I'm from the Broadway Initiative. I'll give a bit more background on our work later on, but I lead our work on the Zero Carbon Business Partnership.
Super. And Ed, please, at Broadway.
I'm Ed Lockhart, convener of the Broadway Initiative, and that because we're a collective of organisations, all of the sort of main 25 business associations working on climate and environment, then my role is to help convene, get them all around the table.
That's super. Miranda. Thank you very much. And Shelley from Frog Light, please tell us about yourself and also your journey so far.
Yes, happy to. Hello, everybody. I'm one of the co-founders of Frog Bikes. We make lightweight bikes for children. And we've been going about 10 years. We make about 65,000 bikes a year. And as we've got bigger, we've become aware that that's quite a lot of material that we're responsible for. So we have been looking at our sustainability quite proactively for 2 or 3 years now. We started by trying to estimate all of the activities that we do and attach some sort of emissions number to each of those, so we could really focus on where the biggest issues were. And it's ended up being surprisingly very, very good for business. I feel it's the right thing to do anyway, but as a business leader, it's also been very positive for the business. So initially, we have actually saved some energy by being more energy efficient, which is obviously hits the bottom line immediately, which is great. We've also reduced our travel and been a bit more thoughtful about how we travel and using EVs rather than petrol cars. We've definitely noticed it's motivated our staff, and it's been a really useful recruitment tool, particularly for the younger generation, the 20s to early 30s, are more keen to work for companies that have a sense of purpose. So that's been a benefit I hadn't expected to see, I guess. It's even improved our bikes. All the activities that we've done have taken weight off our bikes to make them even lighter, which is great for kids. And lots of the activities that we do have made the bikes more long lasting. So actually that's great for customers as well, great for parents that are buying the bikes, and they're changing hands second hand, third hand, fourth hand because they're lasting longer. So that's been very beneficial for the business. And really importantly, a key stakeholder, which is our bank, is very keen to see what we're doing in terms of decarbonisation, because of course all the banks have very ambitious net zero targets and they can't achieve them without all of their clients achieving them. It's essentially their loan book that they're trying to decarbonise. So they're always really keen to support any initiatives that we're taking to strip carbon emissions out of our activities. I mentioned earlier, we started off by trying to measure or at least estimate what our emissions were. The data isn't perfect out there yet, but it's kind of 80-20. We were able to estimate it sufficiently to work out what the really big hotspots were. And we kind of divided the activities into the short-term quick wins, which is mostly switching energy providers to a low carbon tariff or a renewables tariff. That took several years of badgering our landlords to switch, but we did get there in the end. But by far the biggest sources of emissions for us, because we're a manufacturer, are deep into our supply chain. It's all of our scope 3. So it's the aluminium that we get from China and ship around the world. It's the rubber in our tires. It's the stainless steel. It's the plastic and cardboard in our packaging. So we have taken several different approaches. One is trying to design our packaging and our bikes differently so we can strip out some of the high carbon materials. And in doing so, we've improved the bikes at the same time, which is great. But also then working with our supply chain, and that's a longer term win, trying to persuade our suppliers to switch to higher content of recycled material, and even better, to start using renewable energy. Some of our Asian suppliers are more willing than others. And in some cases, I think we'll even end up reshoring in order to access really low carbon materials much closer to home. So it's a kind of complicated picture, but we have pledged to halve our emissions by 2030 and get to net zero by 2050. And so far we're on track to do that. We took our base year of 2019 and we are tracking where we should be at the moment. So it's all possible. And my key message, I think, is it's more beneficial to the business than lots of people expect. And I've got involved in zero carbon business just because Chris asked me as an SME to have a look at the materials that they were producing to see how they can be as relevant as possible and as kind of as action oriented as possible, I think, for SMEs. So I've really enjoyed the chance to contribute to that and help in a small way to shape some of those materials. I think we'll be coming on to talk more about in a minute.
No, that's brilliant. Thank you very much. It's really important to hear about how it's been, what drove you to do it in the first place, but then about how it's proving to be a positive business move as well. Can I just ask, is it being helpful to you in reducing your energy bills right now?
Yes, to some extent. I mean, they'd be even higher if we hadn't taken some of those initiatives to reduce to improve our efficiency. So even things like how we heat all the workstations in our factory, it's a big old space. So just looking at how we heat the person rather than heat the whole space, that's made an enormous difference to our energy bills. Yeah. And
bottom line benefit for that straight away as well.
Immediately, yes.
Yeah. And you spoke about scope 3 emissions. This is the magical lingo of climate for those who haven't found it yet. But scope 3, they're the emissions that your whole supply chain are responsible for, aren't they? And so that's, I know you said a bit about it, but it's quite tricky, isn't it? How do you infuse your supply chain, and how do you persuade them to be part of this with you?
Yes, exactly. And frankly, a lot of them don't really have the data on their own emissions yet. So we've just had to use sort of industry averages of what a ton of aluminium from China tends to emit. And until our suppliers can give us more accurate information, but still that showed us broadly where the key areas to tackle were. And because we're only an SME, we're not the biggest bike brand in the world, we've worked really closely with other bike brands, small and large, to try and tackle all of our suppliers collectively. So I think we're seeing a lot more really proactive collaboration between different players, competitors in industries, because we know we're all trying to tackle the same things. And if each of us can write to each of the suppliers and say, look, our target is to get to halve our emissions by 2030, and we can only do it by improving the materials. The more times they hear that, the more receptive they are to starting to tweak their business models. At the beginning, we were really faced with blank looks and denial that anything could be better. And in the last 18 months, most of our suppliers have begun to listen, and some of them have been really forthcoming in making some big changes. So hunt as a pack would be my advice to SMEs.
That's really helpful, Shane. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here. And hopefully we'll hear more of your examples during our question and answer stage, where we turn to you for what your answer to that question would be as well. So let me just remind all the attendees, we are recording this. That's because we're going out in partnership with lots of chambers of commerce, and also through the whole Broadway network of the business representative organisations like FSB and IOD and CBI, and a whole raft of trade associations. So there's a lot of people who can't be here today that do want to hear what you're saying. So you just need to be aware of that. If you're posing a comment or a question later, that unfortunately it will live on. So whatever you're going to do, remember that it's going to be something which other people will see as well. I just wanted to give you fair warning of that. So it's great, lastly, to introduce Stephen Sykes, who's the head of sustainability in the chamber where I am, but also so much more. And then we'll move into the first section of the event. So Stephen?
Right, I didn't hear that last piece. I was just introducing,
getting you to introduce yourself, please, if that's okay.
Stephen Sykes, I'm the Director of Sustainability for East Lancashire Chamber of Commerce, and I look after the Chamber Low Carbon Programme as well as our commercial development. And on the side, I'm the Director and Co-founder of the 2030 Hub in Liverpool, which is the world's first United Nations recognised local hub promoting the Sustainable Development Goals, climate action being goal number 13.
Super, thank you very much. And we might start posting some useful web pages like the 2030 Hub, etc., and Broadway and things like that in the chat, so you can pick those up as well. So as you can see, we have an agenda below us on this screen, where we're going to touch first on why businesses should be taking action. Stephen and I are going to tackle that. Obviously, you've heard quite a lot of that from Shelley, but we'll start from the sort of first principles bit, if you haven't actually got to the point where you're as immersed in it as Shelley is. So Stephen and I will talk about that. And then Chris is going to lead us through the objectives of Zero Carbon Business Initiative and the partnership with Chambers and many other organisations, and then take you through the resources that are available on zerocarbonbusiness.uk, how that will help you, where this site is going in the future, but also then your input. So we want to hear about your input in two places. One is around the whole difficulties and what's happening, and how we can actually, what assistance you're needing to reduce your energy costs and move to net zero, and sort of start looking at that, and that'll be a good discussion. But then specifically, the second discussion will be about your input into what's needed on the zerocarbonbusiness.uk site. So after you've seen it and Chris has taken us through it, that's where it's really useful to help develop it in partnership with businesses. Because this is being built by the same team that built the .gov.uk site for the government. And that's very much how it evolved. It evolved talking to those people who were using it to say, oh no, fix this, change that, that's not clear, to make sure it really does suit the user in the best possible way. So we are aiming to talk about that as well today. So first of all, I want to just touch on right from the very basics. Why should businesses be actually taking action on this whole agenda? And I'm going to turn to Stephen to do this in a bit of you and I talking backwards and forwards, Stephen, if that's okay.
Well, I was going to say, one of the main reasons why a lot of businesses are getting in touch with the Chamber Low Carbon program at the moment. One, energy prices has impacted on them, and of course the message that we've been saying is that now is the time to look at net zero, to actually just focus on reducing your energy consumption rather than the negative feedback of, oh, I can't afford to do net zero now, it's too expensive. No, it's completely the opposite. This is the time you should be focusing on it. And as I say, the second bullet point there is actually taking control of how much energy you need and when you need that energy. So because you can actually talk to your local energy provider to actually find out, because they might want you to not use certain pieces of kit at certain times of the day. They might want you to, be a bit more flexible, and you can actually earn some discount or cash that way. Equally, I must admit that at the moment, swapping around for suppliers is more of a challenge at this point to try and reduce your prices, but that might be something more for the future. But like I say, that's why I have a lot of coming to us. We have seen an increase in companies wanting to generate their own electricity on site, predominantly via photovoltaics. And there are a number of options. The high street banks now have all their various green loans. So it's now become a mainstream loan that you can get. Equally, there are people who want access to your roof. They'll provide the photovoltaics. It's just that you then have to buy the electricity generated from your roof from them. You never own the equipment, and they again that there are a lot of different ways round actually having the generating your own electricity.
And with the price rises being as they are, and with the cost of kit coming down, the payback period is getting shorter and shorter, isn't it? On whether it's LEDs to reduce your consumption or solar panels to actually give you some on-site generation, it's getting more feasible, isn't it?
And equally with the photovoltaics, the efficiency of the cells has increased. So there's a little bit more flexibility on whether you need a perfectly south-facing roof. There's a little bit more leeway because of the efficiency of the cells themselves.
So if that's the whole energy pricing, energy bills side of the equation, there's then the whole customers, financiers, stakeholders, all of those who are moving into the space where they're going to require you to do this, aren't they?
Well, I think there's a few things. There's a few pressures that are now starting to impact on a number of our clients who come through to the Chamber Low Carbon Programme. So one, they're looking to reduce energy consumption, but another driver is that their customer is now starting to ask for what are their carbon emissions? Can they have their carbon footprint? And we have discovered that quite a number of our larger companies are actually supplying the public sector. So the small company locally has now suddenly become scope 3 of our larger member. And of course, because it's a public sector procurement, and be over 5 million, they're now having to start to put their carbon reduction plans in place. And the SME supply chain is rapidly being called in to actually start reporting on their emissions. And another reason for carbon reduction plans suddenly becoming popular at the moment. So a lot of it is market driven.
Exactly. Where your customers are going to require you to go down that route, whether you like it or not. And the whole carbon reduction plan from government, this is now, if you're very geeky, it's planning policy note 06/21, but this is a government requirement for if you're trying to supply into a great big over £5 million public sector funded development like Eden North, which we hope is about to get its funding from government to have an Eden literally in the north, in Morecambe. So if you want to supply into that, you're going to need to have a carbon reduction plan. But we hope that this is the way in which government will then continue to apply that positive pressure to their own procurement, that they start to want people to have a carbon reduction plan, show they're being proactive. What we don't want them to do is to start to stipulate a whole range of disorganised measures with standards you have to achieve and things you have to spend money on, whereas actually the carbon reduction plan instruction is reasonably sort of doable, isn't it? It's not too tricky.
No, and they have taken into account that of the 15 categories of scope 3 emissions, they are really only looking at water, waste, sorry, not water, waste, business travel, staff commute, transport and logistics, upstream and downstream. So these are the things that are relatively accessible to people, and there are standard conversion factors for those activities. So even the government is being pragmatic in their net zero carbon reduction plans by not addressing all 15 straight away. I'm sure at some point over time, more classifications will be included.
We keep trying to keep them on that straight and narrow path of not confusing the issue by sticking to one metric and then gradually bringing the sort of the level at which that applies down and down and down. And you'll see it come into planning policy. You'll see it coming into public sector procurement policy. And in the end, you'll see a carbon obligation on anything that you're buying or anything that you're manufacturing. So it's all going in that direction of persuading you. But there's also as Shelley touched on when she was talking about her own business, your financiers, your banks are starting to look for requirements to behave in a climate proactive way, aren't they? And your insurers and your employees, of course. Stephen? Sorry, I was just wondering if you wanted to.
Sorry, my internet is slightly unstable.
It's a little pingy, isn't it? Me. Yes. Sorry.
Yeah. But I was going to say we are gaining it from a number of fronts, because we're in fact I've just delivered a training course in person as opposed to online, and we did have a couple of local authority councillors in the session finding out more about net zero because it's on their radar more.
Yeah, exactly. It's growing and growing in terms of prevalence. You're not going to be able to avoid it, and it's the need to sort of be proactive about that and get the financial benefit from being proactive, isn't it, Shelley? Yeah, certainly that's great. So let me leave that section there, and hopefully that gives you all of those various pressures, but also encouraging moves as to why this is a good thing to do. And let me hand over to Chris from Broadway to actually talk you through the objectives of the Carbon Business Initiative and the partners, including all the chambers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Miranda. Really great discussion to set the scene for what follows. So I'm going to start off by just introducing the Broadway Initiative, which is where Ed and I come from. And what the Broadway Initiative is the coalition of the main trade associations working with government experts and environment bodies to support all businesses to meet climate environmental goals, and also to establish trade associations as leaders, leveraging convening power, networks and knowledge. So we have a wide range of different organisations as part of our broad membership. One of our programmes is the Zero Carbon Business Partnership, and this was initiated about 18 months ago in response originally to a request from Federation of Small Businesses, who felt that it was difficult for small businesses to understand what they should do towards net zero, and to navigate a quite complicated forest of different sources and people who are keen to support them. And what we initially did was a discovery project to find out to what extent this actually was a challenge for small businesses. Concluded that it is indeed difficult for them to for you to find your way through all the different recommendations. And since then, in fact, this has been a view that's been reinforced by the Energy Savings Trust and then Climate Change Committee, all agreeing that there needs to be a more straightforward pathway for small businesses to figure out what to do. And so the programme itself is it sort of draws on a focused group from within our wider membership. So we have the 5 cross-economy trade associations, so FSB, British Chambers of Commerce, CBI, IOD, Make UK, and then also the Institute of Environmental Management and Assessment. And then we have a series of corporate partners, 2 of which are banks and 3 of which are electricity network providers. And as Shelley commented earlier, banks are increasingly active in this domain as they seek to reduce the emissions of businesses on their loan books, and the electricity network providers have a statutory duty to make sure that they are supporting businesses in their efforts to decarbonise. So we all get together with firstly to provide a platform of advice, which really we're seeing as a sort of gateway to the many different sources that are out there, but a good place to start. And so that's our zerocarbonbusiness.uk site. But we also have a wider goals to collaborate, to understand the needs, barriers, opportunities for SMEs, to prioritise shared investment and coordination and development of content and tools, and also to develop a shared strategy for engaging with the large and diverse community of small businesses. So if you're a chamber or another type of organisation that's supporting small businesses, the thing that we really want you to understand is that what we're providing here is early stage, easy to access advice. It's available through many different routes, including through Chambers of Commerce. It will help keep you and businesses that you support abreast of government requirements, and provides a way to publicise sources of support. So I hope that's given you a bit of a sense of where we're coming from. What I then wanted to do was get into a bit more detail on what is actually available. So this gives you a sense of the materials that you can find on zerocarbonbusiness.uk. We describe it as a beta service, and this is because there's lots of valuable content there. We're continually developing it, and we have great plans to develop it further over the coming year, which I'll get into a bit more in future. But at the moment, what we have is a kind of overview homepage that provides a simple way for you to land on the content and understand what is there. And so we have quite a sort of bare bones presentation, but the point of this is to allow you to find the material you want as quickly as possible. So you can find your way into listings of events that we maintain. We also have a set of case studies of businesses that have taken action. We also have a support directory, which we aim to update continuously, but what this lists is all the particularly European Regional Development Fund funded programs that we can identify regionally, as well as regional and countrywide support programs. So that's a great place to go and look for the more one-to-one support. Then what we have is content that is either kind of topic-based. So I'll tell you a bit about our piece on reducing the impact of rising energy costs shortly. We also have content that is more organised around particular sectors. So we have a simple tool at the moment that allows you to specify which sector you're in and which region you're in, and it will pull together a basket of content that is helpful specifically for you. So to go into a bit more detail on our particular piece of content on energy efficiency and cost reduction, which is obviously the focus of today. So really this guide, which you can find at that link at the top of the page, it helps you find actions you can take to quickly reduce costs, ideas for longer term investments, and what support is available. And I think it pulls together quite a few of the themes that colleagues have already touched on. starts off with a little introduction on why prices are rising, but then gets into the meat of what to do about it. So as we mentioned, a first step towards energy savings is monitoring your consumption and how much it costs according to your contract. And obviously this is important for SMEs that don't regularly monitor usage or haven't looked at the details of your energy deal in some time. If you don't already have one, ask your supplier about installing a smart meter. These devices provide real-time information on energy consumption, and having one means you can access a wider range of energy deals, including smart tariffs. You could also explore sub-metering, high usage activities or equipment, which can help identify which parts of your business are the most costly and where you can save. Depending on the size of your business, it can be helpful to assign your energy management program to a particular job role or working group, and you may also want to review your energy provider, although as Stephen said earlier, options around that at the moment are perhaps more limited. Having got that sort of baseline understanding of where you're at, we then lay out some possible opportunities to save using low or no cost measures, and you can achieve substantial savings by spending time and attention on behavioural changes and smaller scale investments. So a first step is setting your heat lower and avoiding overcooling. And I was interested to hear about Shelley's person-specific heating approach that you'd also been looking at. You could get a smart thermostat or smart thermostats to control your heating and cooling systems. Obviously have a digital display or app on your phone. It gives you more flexibility to control and schedule temperatures. And it's also worth bearing in mind if thermostats are affected by sunlight, which may seem unlikely at the moment, or drafts or heating and cooling sources, they won't work properly. So moving thermostats may also help. It's also important to do regular operations and maintenance checks, as keeping your building equipment and systems in good working order keeps running costs down and reduces the risk of equipment failure and unscheduled downtime. Older doors and windows can be a major source of heating and cooling loss in a building. So some of this can be prevented by making sure seals and draft proofing are in place and working properly. If you've got compressors and motors, you need to make sure they're running properly. So these are all sort of relatively low or no cost measures to look at, but then we turn to investing in longer term energy savings. And as has been mentioned, some energy saving measures require higher upfront costs, but with current high prices, these are going to pay back quicker than in the past. Starting point being investing in better insulation, which can have a quick payback depending on the state of your current building and what type of measures are needed. Switching to more efficient light bulbs can also offer a good return on investment, and automated lighting systems have higher upfront costs, but can also pay back quickly. For those with mechanical equipment, when you're ready to invest in new equipment, variable speed or frequency drives can have a major impact. Or if refrigeration is important to your business, it makes sense to buy more efficient models or take good care of the ones you have. And regular maintenance alone can save up to 10% on costs in that area. It may also be that you should consider replacing office equipment with more efficient models. So these are all, and there are more that you could identify, and what we particularly recommend is reaching out to sector trade associations, who will often have gone into quite a lot of depth on specific activities that are relevant to your particular business sector. So we've just laid out a few, but speak to trade associations for further depth. We then talk about generating your own energy, as Stephen mentioned. So we've got check out our solar panels page to find out what types there are, how much they cost, and how they benefit your business. And it may be the case if you're in a remote area that installing a wind turbine could be something to think about. Then, as I mentioned, there are several ways to get short and long-term support to manage higher energy bills, and our funding and support page to find green business grant programs in your region. Many can help with improving energy efficiency and offer matching investments or grants. And finally, we really warmly recommend, welcome even, feedback on all our content. I mean, this is such a fast-moving environment and policies are changing really quickly. So we'd love to hear from you if you have recommendations for new topics to cover, resources to point at, or any changes needed. So I'm going to pause here to have an opportunity for people to ask questions before we look ahead to coming developments for next year.
No, thank you very much. That's great. So in a few minutes, we're going to touch on where the platform is being developed to over the next year and new directions of travel. And that's where I think there'd be a really good conversation after that section around improvements to the platform. So let's have a conversation now around what you're actually tackling as businesses or organizations dealing with businesses in terms of their journey to cope with the energy price rises right now, installing energy efficiency measures, but also going on that whole net zero or lower carbon or lower climate impact journey. And let's see what our businesses are actually feeling. There was an interesting question that came up earlier. Loretta, we got to the answer in the end, but you were asking about percentage of the UK's SMEs that felt like they were part of a supply chain for a larger corporate. Do you want to just touch on that? Are you part of a supply chain, or your businesses that you're working with, are they looking at that as an issue, or you're just wondering how many businesses are really feeling that potential pressure from suppliers? You want to come in?
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Good. Well, thanks, Todd, for finding that study. For a while, I'm based in Hertfordshire, and there might be differences compared to other regions or national picture. I've been part of FSB for a while as a membership advisor, so I spoke with sort of over the past year, I spoke with about over 200 small businesses locally, and the impression and only a small fraction actually in the supply chains of large corporates, large enough to ask them or demand them to contribute to their net zero and or report on carbon footprint as part of corporates scope 3. So that was really a fact-finding question, I would say.
No, that's good. So you're not, so you're only feeling there's a small percentage coming forward saying that's a question they're already getting.
Yes, and I was linking that information with the fact that of the 5.5 million SMEs, or for 5.9 million, which we had sort of a year ago officially, or pre-pandemic, I think the figure is, if I'm not mistaken, but definitely not more than, not less than 90% have 0 employees. Mm. So we're really talking about 90% plus of SMEs being micro businesses, not having employees, not having premises, having energy bills usually hidden in the sort of some sort of a office rental agreement, right? Or doing the business through sort of outsourcing almost all the functions. So I think I'm just trying to understand, just like you do, where is it all going? Mm. The pressure, the push from the corporate supply chains is of course a natural thing, and we should be leveraging it as much as possible. But what is the reach? If we only focus on that, how many SMEs are we actually going to reach, right?
Yeah, I'm going to come over to Stephen to actually talk to that slightly.
I was just going to say, in East Lancashire, we have a high percentage of manufacturing businesses. So they are the ones that are being impacted straight away. and some of them are getting to the point of their customers are asking them, what's the carbon footprint of the chair that they are manufacturing and supplying? So for some companies, of some SMEs, the level of question that they're getting related to carbon emissions is getting quite sophisticated. But like I say, in East Lancashire especially, we do have a very high percentage of manufacturing companies, but even a number of our service sector companies are starting to feel the squeeze on this as well. We have a company that provides dietary information for schools, school dinners. They've also had to start submitting the carbon figures because they're part of a framework agreement. So even though the contract might not be 5 million per se for them, because they're on a framework agreement, everybody on that framework agreement is having to provide the data. But I have to confess, for us, it's mainly manufacturing with some service sector SMEs.
Thank you, Shelley.
Which part of that would you like me to address?
Whichever part you want.
I would totally agree with Stephen's point that it's probably the larger customers, our trade customers. We supply to a lot of councils, for example. They are beginning to show some interest in our emissions. I would say that it depends on the sector you supply, whether or not your consumers, your end users are interested. I hand on heart, not a single family has asked us what the emissions are associated with the children's bike they're thinking of buying, and no other bike in the bike store will know what emissions are from each bike either. So we're maybe ahead of the curve on that, and I think we're happy to try and educate people to say, well, actually, riding a bike is very green, but think about the emissions, and this is what we're doing to reduce them. So I'm not sure that we're feeling pressure from consumers yet, but if you work maybe in the food or in the packaging industry, you certainly will be feeling pressure from consumers. So it's probably a little bit industry specific where some of those market pressures are coming from.
Thank you. Chris, are you hearing that from the different trade associations that you're with?
Yes, I mean, I think going back to our membership, for example, the construction sector is one with very large number of SMEs and well up the list as a source of emissions, and also food and drink, retail. These are all sectors who are actively working on these issues. Nevertheless, I mean, absolutely, it is, you know, when people talk about SMEs, it's a very wide group of different size businesses that is exceedingly diverse. So I think it is always a matter of prioritizing, you know, who needs support, where are the emissions reductions going to come from, where do people need help to get through the current energy crisis as well.
Thank you. No, that's great. Do post any comments or questions you want to lead on in the chat. Chris, you might not have noticed, you've got a fan. Mariana Garcia from Cambridgeshire Chambers of Commerce is really keen to work with you on developing, well, hopefully, I'm presuming, getting the platform, the assistance into the Cambridgeshire Chamber of Support. Mariana, do you want to say anything about that?
Hi, I'm not sure if my camera's on. 1 second.
We can hear you anyway, which is good.
That's good. Hi, can you see me?
Yep.
Hi, yeah, so my name is Miranda Garcia. I'm from the Cambridgeshire Chambers of Commerce. I'm fairly new, but my job role is Policy and Partnerships Executive. And I have emailed Miranda and Stephen, and we'll be having a little chat to find out more about their net zero and what they're doing in that space, because that's something that we really want to be doing in the Cambridgeshire area. And just to give you an overview, we also cover Peterborough and Stamford accordingly with Cambridgeshire, and we really want to be doing something within that space to support the local businesses in the area. So yeah, I just wanted to have an initial chat just so we can really push things and move things forward, and perhaps having similar conversations and webinars, just like the one we're having today with our local businesses as well. Thank you.
That would be fantastic.
No, it'd be good, wouldn't it? Really good. And just to give Chambers some sort of idea around the credibility of what we're talking about, Chris, you've got a newly firmed up relationship with Bays in terms of where the platform's going to be used as the absolute first port of call for free assistance to all businesses, haven't you? Do you want to just touch on that for us?
Well, very much as you just said, over the coming year, we're going to be working much more closely with Bays and also SME Climate Hub to provide a single landing point for these matters. I don't know if Ed would also like to chip in at this point.
Come off mute. No, absolutely. I mean, this is something we've been working with Bays for a while. The Climate Change Committee, amongst others, had called for a single one-stop shop for small businesses on net zero, and we've agreed with Bays and with the SME Climate Hub to create that single, join everything up, and to have a single website. So we'll effectively manage the UK pages, endorsed by government, and that'll link through. So the SME Climate Hub is an international platform, and so will be the UK pages of that international platform. So it's a really great opportunity actually to sort of make sure there's really good basic content across all of the activities, actions, sectors, that are involved in getting to net zero and making sure there's really good support. So, I mean, that's why we're particularly pleased to be on these kind of webinars and getting people's feedback on what that should look like and how we should develop it to make sure that it really meets people's needs. No, and I think, I mean, a core part of what we're trying to do is to provide a good sort of where to start place. We're not going to provide detail on absolutely everything, but what we do want to do is to point to the best sources of information that are out there, so that if you come to this site, you'll be able to find the right information in a neutral, sort of trusted way. So that's really the ambition over the next year, as Chris says. No, it's a good progression for us, because we've been keen to sort of join up with Bays and SME Climate Hub as far as possible, and really keen to be working actually with the Chambers of Commerce and others on that, to provide that sort of central point and linking off to everyone else's the best information that's out there.
No, it's great. It's a really of the moment question for two reasons. One is obviously the fact that energy prices are so ridiculously sky high, and when the energy support scheme ends at the end of March, those bills will rocket, and that's what we're all worried about with our businesses, is what they then do. Because if your bill is going to times by 4, that's huge. And I was on a call this morning with Bays where they're literally asking, what should we be saying to businesses about energy efficiency? How do we help convince them to make progress on this? And then how do we help them make progress on this? I'm just wondering if there are chambers in the room who are working with businesses or businesses themselves, if anyone would like to give us their insight on how on earth you're tackling this, or what you're hearing from your business, or what you're doing yourself in your business. If you'd like to raise your electronic hand or put your camera on and wave, we'd be delighted to hear from you. Otherwise, we'll end up going on to the next bit of the agenda. But I just want to see if there's anybody who's wanting to share where they're at the moment, or what you need or want government to provide to help you go down that journey of improving your energy efficiency and reducing your bill. Everyone's being very shy today. Right, let's go on to the next stage of the agenda, but you can still put your hand up and raise any question you want. We'll come back to it. Stephen, sorry.
I was just going to say, one of the things that's starting to come through now, again, that people are looking at their bills. We're going to have to run a few webinars or seminars on how to understand and read your business electricity bill, because there's not only the commodity charge on there, and actually your commodity, the actual price of electricity is actually only a small amount of your commercial electricity bill. So a lot of people are now starting to look at, what do all these acronyms mean that I'm suddenly being hit for? Is this something that I can reduce, or is that a fixed element of my bill? So a number of businesses are now starting to try to want to get a better understanding of what their bill is actually telling them.
No, exactly. And if a business doesn't understand which bit is their usage rocketing up in that particular month, and then wondering why, and they just see it all as a sort of fudge that they don't understand the depth of it. Shelley, is that something you had to tackle when you were starting this journey?
Yes, it certainly was. It was a learning curve for some of the finance team trying to understand that. But linked with it, one of our biggest challenges, which I slightly alluded to earlier, was we're not directly in charge of our own energy choices. We have a landlord in South Wales with our factory and a landlord for our offices in Berkshire. And in both cases, they buy all the energy for the whole site, and we're just one tenant. So it can be quite frustrating that we have sub meters, we have to pay what we use, but they manage the buildings. And I think this is a peculiarity for a lot of SMEs. Maybe we need some help on how to manage that relationship with our landlords, how to persuade them to make some of the fabric improvements that will lower our bills, because it's not directly in their interest. They can just keep passing the energy costs on to us, and we're not really able to make some of those fabric improvements that we talked about earlier. So I think we could do with some help on that.
Yeah, I agree with you. If we can provide any assistance, these suggestions, we will. One of the really worrying things we saw for our local businesses was, although they obviously saw their energy price per unit cost rocketing up with their electricity and gas bills before cap came in place, they also saw their standing charge rocketing up, and you can do nothing about your standing charge, and government didn't sort of do anything to hold that down. So we're really worried that there's those costs are rising for businesses, not even in a way they can actually address by reducing their energy use. It's very frustrating. So no more questions at this stage, but please do put them in the chat or raise your little yellow hands on Zoom. So let's move on, Chris, to the next stage of the agenda and hear where we're taking the Zero Carbon Business.uk site in 2023 and beyond. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. So an immediate or reasonably immediate over the next few weeks development will be that we're going to start adding new content onto the site, where what we've really been focusing on over the last few months is to start to go down into more specific detail on what actions UK businesses may need to take. And so what I'm going to do now is just give you a quick rundown on the different sections that is going to cover. And a question that I'd be very interested to know the answer to is, to what extent people here feel that covers the bases, or whether there are particular themes that you would like to see that aren't there. I mean, I think there's we've probably got the right main big chunks, but if there are any big chunks missing, I'd like to know that. But also specific topics like Stephen's suggestion on how to read your electricity bill or your energy bill, I think would be a great addition. So all the time, what we're doing is listening for questions that the people are asking, so that we can then address those specifically. So the big chunk that is going to appear pretty soon is all around buildings and homes. So this is again addressing the point being made earlier. SMEs can cover a very, very broad range of business sizes. Mostly the content that we are developing is focusing on those who do have some kind of premises that they either own or rent, but we've also included a bit to cover those who are working from home as well. So buildings and homes is one chunk. We're then going to have a section on transport, so another theme that Shelley raised earlier. So this is partly about how you sort of employee modes of transport, but then also thinking about freight and logistics for those who are shipping things around. We're then going to have a section on optimizing production and cold storage. So this is getting into some more detail on specific processes for different sectors. And this, I think, is a section that we're going to need to build out progressively over time, and gets into that question of how do you prioritize the kind of highest energy using type processes, which are going to be both those who are particularly in need of help over coming months, and also those who will be needing to find ways to decarbonize over time. Then we're going to have a section on renewable energy. So solar panels, windmills, we've put, or wind turbines, we've put in heat pumps in there as well, and also the possibility of switching to greener energy suppliers. We've then got a section on supply chain, which is obviously a theme that's been extremely important for Shelley's business over time. And so this can include both understanding the emissions from your supply chain, but different ways of tackling those, thinking about using buying groups, and then also getting into the ideas of kind of circular or low carbon products, and also waste and recycling in there. Then got a very small section on offsets, possibly one to not put in its own right, but this is a topic that people are interested in, and so we want to be able to address the extent to which this is relevant, if at all, to the small business community. And then a final section, again, this is a bit of a stub at the moment, to start to get into land use. And obviously one very large section of the small business economy is around agriculture and food manufacturing. So this could be an extremely large topic, but at the moment we're just getting started to look at sort of very generic types of issue that people might be thinking about. So those are all different areas of content that we'll be adding to the site over coming weeks and months. And what we're planning to do is, over the course of this coming year, to once they're up, to start promoting these almost like a sort of, you could imagine someone deciding to kind of follow the site and get a nugget of insight to think about each week, working their way through all these different topics. More broadly, as Ed, Miranda and I have already mentioned, a big deal for us over the coming months is going to be establishing a coordination with BEIS and SME Climate Hub, drawing together our respective foci in this area into a single place. What we are also extremely keen to do is to build a community of net zero leaders and supporters, which I invite you all to consider yourself to be part of that for a start, and to really build up a sense that there are many people working on these topics across the UK, and to provide a way for everyone to get together and compare notes. And so what we're planning to do is to make much more use of webinars, maybe even actually meeting up in real life in different places. I think those kinds of events can be extremely powerful and provide opportunities for people to kind of draw energy from each other, metaphorically, on what they can do and what the opportunities really are. Also then building on those activity specific pieces of content I've just been talking about, what we're going to do is build those out into more sector specific content. So we already have a section up on the site that we developed with the British Retail Consortium and the British Independent Retailers Association, which focuses in specifically on retail. But what we plan to do is work with the different sectoral trade associations to focus in on what a good slice through the material would be for given business sector. We want to build tools that help people navigate their way through all those different pieces so that you can home in quickly, provide you a quick way of not reading all the stuff about buildings that you can't do anything about if you're a tenant, and get you through to the what to do if you're a tenant piece, for example. So those kinds of filtering tools, I think, will be something that will help people move even more swiftly through the content. And then finally, and perhaps Ed could expand on this a little bit, we see all this work as being very integral to our wider engagement with government. And what we want to be doing is making sure that we can gather up through these kinds of forums or any other route that we can pick up issues that people may be encountering, either because of particular pieces of policy or in particular business sectors, where if there are opportunities for the government to do something that will help people, to provide that very focused, specific, evidenced feedback from the business community, so that government is able to get a proper insight into what is going on and how things can be moved on more quickly. I don't know if you want to expand on that, Ed, or whether I've covered it all there.
So let me say a little more. So as we mentioned at the first, we bring, as Broadway Initiative, we bring together the main, well, perhaps some of the most relevant of the 25 business associations across the country. And what we've agreed, actually we just got agreement to it from Grant Shapps, the Bayes Secretary of State, yesterday, is to set up an ongoing mechanism for the business community to work with ministers in government on net zero, and really to work on a number of things, both on this platform, but also on sector roadmaps. So in each of the main sort of business sectors, to have a clear and agreed roadmap to get into net zero, but also for ministers in Bayes and other government departments to help from a policy or to help remove barriers perspective, you know, if there's specific things that are making it harder to get to net zero, or things that are missing in terms of finance or whatever, that Bayes ministers agreed to sort of help work on those. So yeah, no, if there are particular things from a small business perspective that's making it harder to get to net zero, then, you know, feed them back, and then we'll take them through to that forum. Sorry, I've got the younger generation here as well, so just next to me. But anyway, yeah, that just adds to what you were saying, Chris.
Thanks very much. That's equivalent to my dog, which hasn't barked yet, but no, I think that's really useful. Thank you very much, both of you. I just wanted to give a quick steer to the chambers a second, especially. But that applies to the other business relationship organisations or trade associations that we've got with us or listening to this later on. The idea with zerocarbonbusiness.uk is that it provides that free access to all site that you can put on your own site, or any reference point that you point businesses at, so that you've got that first set of free, easy to access advice and content to provide to your members or companies you're supporting, so that even if you are a chamber who hasn't yet got into this space, you've got something to ask those first questions. Or if you're a chamber that's busy being involved in it and running loads of events locally, you don't have to keep your head up to date with the consultancy side of it until you're ready to do that. And that's the same reason why it's also on the British Chambers of Commerce site, is so that the British Chambers of Commerce doesn't have to turn itself into an environmental consultant and keep on top of all of those different places. So it's there and free and easy to access to do exactly that for you and any of your members that you want to point at it. So do we have any asks from you as businesses or chambers about what you would like to see on this site that you haven't seen yet? Or even if it's just, I haven't found where it is there a bit about this? Is there anything that's coming to mind that you'd like to say? is there anything there about, I don't know, LEDs, or how to decide I'm going to install those, or ground source heat pumps, how much is that going to cost me? Or any, Anna.
Hi there.
Hi,
One of my questions, it links into skills, because a lot of businesses may not have the tools or the training to develop their own staff in terms of how they adapt, or what's needed in terms of green tech skills and things like that, which are, regardless of which sector they're in. So will there eventually be links to what's happening locally, so that businesses can then make sure that they're tapping into that training and that development of the staff? Because we need to make sure we are on top of the green tech skills, or the future skills that are needed, especially in this area.
That's a great question, Anna. Ed, Chris?
I mean, obviously the answer is going to be yes, but so at the moment we have a lot of we have our big listing of all the as I say, the sort of, well, programs like Miranda's in particular areas. Those I think, broadly speaking, probably tend to focus quite a lot on the general how to do it, whereas I'm wondering if there are different kinds of support providers that you think we should be pointing to that are more focused around skills. I mean, is it particular I don't know, higher education establishments, or are there particular groups that you're thinking of?
It's really just to mention that a lot of the chambers nationally in the UK, as well as the FSB in 2 or 3 areas, and I think a couple of other sector organisations are working on local skills improvement plans. A lot of that is the cross-cutting theme of the green skills, and so that's why it needs to really be there, so that when businesses are looking at what they can do to reduce their carbon footprint and everything, it's also about that skills development as well.
Absolutely, Anna. I think you're absolutely right. An awful lot of the skills development fund bids that were done by colleges all over the UK focused on low carbon skills. And that content really needs some sharing and spreading around. I've sent a link into the chat there, which is for lowcarbonportal.co.uk. And this was something where we had one of those skills development fund pieces locally that was all focused on low carbon skills. So we pulled together all the courses that were available, anything vaguely low carbon, across the 13, I think it's 13, might be wrong, 13 colleges across the whole of Lancashire, and have put them on a central portal. So that's something which you can access through that link, lowcarbonportal.co.uk. There are 42 courses across the colleges in Lancashire on low carbon. So the same thing will be happening all over the place. But I am worried there's lots of duplication in some areas that people aren't covering at all. But at least if we try and get, as you say, all of those resources together in one place, we can at least map where there's overlap, where there are useful things. So if we can, maybe we can have a skills page, Chris, and we can all throw links on there. So do use that one and anything else. And then maybe that can help us identify where there are gaps in provision.
Yes, thank you. That's a really useful suggestion. And I'm just thinking, Institute of Environmental Management and Assessment is this is obviously a topic that they major on as well. So there's probably something we can draw together with them too on that. Brilliant.
And Anna has posted the exactly what Sussex all the colleges are doing now. So there's a whole collection of courses you can access through that. So that gives you a starter for 10 for all of these. And that's great. So carry on putting links in the chat, anybody who things where we should be funneling people towards them through this platform, because that's exactly what we should be doing. But it sounds like skills is a huge issue you're seeing, isn't it?
Well, I was going to say, one of the things we're starting to work with our local colleges, looking at on the softer side, like I said, there's lots of green tech skills, but there's then the soft skills of actual how to do the carbon footprint, how to get your people motivated on board. So there are some apprenticeship courses that have already been designed as part of the business admin module. There are specific courses that they tend to be 3-year apprenticeships, but if you're looking at growing your own, they're perfect because they're nationally recognised, and because they're on the apprenticeship register, some of these will be significantly funded.
Yeah. Shelley, was that something you found really difficult when you were looking at this, that there wasn't enough skills provision, or there was lots of skills provision and it was very confused? Or
I've just been thinking this through as we had this discussion. We haven't really done any formal training on it. It's just part of our culture, because I think it's come from us as founders of the business. It's part of every discussion that we have. It's part of every decision. So we don't see it as kind of a separate skill. We just see it as a cultural change that's evolved within the business, that every time you look at changing our packaging provider, then we ask the questions of the packaging provider. Maybe we should have embedded more hard skills in the team as we did it, but we haven't, and it hasn't held us back. So I'm being a bit controversial on that. I enjoy a good Coursera course on this regularly. There's all sorts of free LinkedIn courses, all sorts at every level of prior knowledge just around carbon literacy. But as an organisation, just because we talk about it all the time, I think people are picking up quite a lot, and they're curious, so they're reading more, and they bring ideas from home into the office, and we talk about domestic improvements to your footprint and that sort of thing. So it's not been at all formal, the approach that we've taken. Perhaps we're missing a trick.
I think you've clearly done the primary thing there, because you've got it properly embedded within your organisation, which is always the tricky bit.
Yes, you probably need both, ideally, don't you? You probably need it kind of bottom up, people actually going through courses, as well as top down encouraging it.
It might add to things now, and also if you've got a mobile workforce, because they're young and they're eager to sort of sometimes move and be in different places, they will then find that useful to get that level of intelligence they've got about this recognised more easily in a different employer, if they've got a formal qualification to back up what you've taught them. But as a business, you've got the primary thing of it being embedded in the business, which is brilliant. But anyone else on the skills topic would like to come in? Everybody's worried that it is the main constraint on us actually progressing properly to net zero, because there aren't enough. Say that, for instance, they've said we need 600,000 installers of heat pumps. We're nowhere near that, you know. So it's a real constraint on what we can actually do nationally in acting on this. But there's also, like you say, every business needing somebody to keep their eyes on this and understand that. So there's in business qualification. So any more input from anyone about areas where you would want to see recognised and featured in the platform going forward? Or things that aren't there? Or should there be routes to all the chambers on there for links to be found to chambers and chamber input? How should we cope with all of that? You're being very quiet. I'm going to tell you all off next time. I'm just going to go around our various speakers and get last words from them. But first of all, Chris, you want to touch on how everybody can get involved in continuing to evolve the platform?
Yes. So, I mean, it's great to see on this call people from many different organisations, some of whom are there to support small businesses as well as small businesses themselves. So we would be extremely keen to help you spread the word on the availability of what is here. And as I was saying before, the more that our resources get used and the more feedback that we get, the better they will get. So what we really want to be pumping up over this coming year is that feedback loop. As part of that, we will be pushing news out both through Twitter, assuming it continues to exist, and LinkedIn. It would be fantastic if you could, if you're a supporter of small businesses, if you can provide links on our through to our resources from your website. And if you wanted to drop me a line on suggestions for how to do that, that would be totally fine. As again, as we start to publish new content, we're going to do that with kind of blog post material as well. So provide interesting things that you can share as well. Also would really appreciate the expert input from everyone here or people that you know. As we are developing new content, we're always looking for kind of expert reviewers to have a quick read through of what we've written to make sure that it's in line with what they think there should be and it is up to date. So if any of these ways of getting involved appeal, then please do just drop me a line at my email address, which is there. It would be great to hear from you. I mean, as part of that, really making sure that we're offering our support in a way that fits in really well with what you're doing yourselves as well. What we're definitely not trying to do is to kind of crowd out all the great work that is going on already. What we want to be much more about is amplifying the impact of that which is already going on, and making sure that we all become greater than the sum of our parts.
Yeah, thank you very much. Ed, do you want to just touch on what's happening next that you're involved in, and what you see as the next place for the portal to go as well?
I'll have a go at that. So no, as we've said, we've just had the agreement, well, both to this net zero mechanism with government for all the business associations to work with government, but also specifically on this platform. So really, the next steps are to design the single site. So at the moment, we've got zero carbon business as is. What we've got to do over the next sort of 5-6 weeks is design a new site that sort of links in, well, that is government branded and links into the International SME Climate Hub. So there's a bit of work there, putting on all the new content that Chris has showed today, so that we've got almost an encyclopedia of the different things that you need to do to get to net zero. We'll then be building out more sort of sectoral, more sort of tailored content. So we've got all those sort of, if you like, building blocks of the content that you need to do. So we'll increasingly be able to provide much more tailored content. So if you're a business doing this in this part of the country, then here's exactly what you need to know. So we'll be able to do that. What we're also looking at alongside this is how do we amplify the advice that's here and the actions that you can take. So we're beginning to look at a campaign, and how do we sort of create more momentum around this, more people taking the actions and being on this journey. So that's something, again, in the new year we've got at least one workshop looking at is how to structure a campaign, bringing in some of the expertise that was used. I don't know if anyone remembers the Act on CO2 campaign from, was it 2008 or something, which was quite a sort of major national campaign. So we've got the people who are involved in that to help look at what would a campaign for the 2020s look like, to really create momentum around net zero, and how can we work across all of the business associations, across British Chambers of Commerce, FSB, CBI, working with government. So those are, just wanted to give you a flavour of some of the things that are sort of coming up over the next weeks and months. Thanks, Miranda.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much. So to come to Stephen and then to Shelley last. Stephen, what are you saying to businesses now that we're working with about the really urgent things they need to act on in this space?
Well, that's tricky, because each business has its own driver as to why it's approaching us. Some it is to reduce their costs, reduce their energy bills. So the first thing I'd say is actually look at how much are you spending per month? Can you actually identify where and when are your peak periods of high use? And then that's where you need to take action. Others are coming because of supply chain pressures and are looking to try and get their carbon footprint done for the first time. So I was going to say that.
Stephen, you've frozen. We'll just give him a second and see if he unsticks. Otherwise, we'll carry on and we'll come back to him in a second. Okay, I'm gonna leave Stephen for a moment and I'm gonna mute him so he doesn't come back in the middle of the sentence. Shelley, could you give us your input as a fellow business? What would you be saying to your fellow businesses on this call about what do they really need to do right now to be safe in this space?
I think I'm probably going to repeat what Stephen might have been saying there. For so many people, it's about energy at the moment, energy reduction for obvious reasons. It's anything that we take at the moment to reduce, any actions we take to reduce our energy use are so motivating because you immediately see a benefit to the business. And I think for lots of people, it's kind of the best way into the sustainability funnel because it's relatively quick payback, it's very measurable, and it's a source of such anxiety at the moment. It's nice to be able to take some action on it. So I love that so much of Chris's focus has been on really actionable tips and advice on how to be more energy efficient, because that's really crucial. But I would also say it's partly about behavior change for the whole team. So talk about sustainability, make it part of the conversation, make sure it's on everybody's objectives, and show people that they can. I think I mentioned earlier, there's a great sense of frustration as individuals. A lot of us feel, what can I do? It's only me. I can't make enough of a change in the world. But when people come to work, the decisions that they make at work are probably responsible for substantially more emissions than all the things they do at home. However good they are at recycling their cardboard and separating their food waste, whatever that is, the decisions they make when they come to work, especially if they're in purchasing or in anything to do with facilities, then they can make a much bigger impact in the decisions that they make at work. So encourage them to do that, talk about it, ask them what their ideas are, and celebrate any successes that you get, because that begins to kind of fuel that virtuous circle and begins to embed it in the culture.
Thank you. No, I think that's really enthusiastic advice from you. I'm going to go back to Stephen, who I believe is there. Hello.
I have no idea why I disappeared. One, as I was initially saying, was to actually look at where are you spending your energy, where are you consuming the energy. But I think the other thing, which Shelley almost touched on, one, talk about it, but actually there's lots of local advice available. Someone fresh coming in and just walking around and asking that dumb question. Why are you doing that? Have you thought of doing? Because with a lot of us, we've got embedded behaviours and patterns of working, and sometimes it just needs someone from outside just to challenge. Why are you doing it that way? Have you thought about? And actually, a fresh pair of eyes is always good in your business.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. I think that's great advice from both of you, both from a how to access the support that's out there, but also how to really take that forward within your own business and get that enthusiasm of your workforce on board. We have a quick question to touch on from Matthew just in our last minutes. Matthew said, Matthew, do you want to say it yourself? Matthew, can you unmute? Are you there? Otherwise, I'll read it for you.
Yeah, hi, sorry. So
that's okay. Say it yourself, Matthew.
With regards to energy and the cost of energy, if you're already driving down your usage, what do you do? What do you do when you get to that baseline point and there is nowhere to go?
Yeah. I think I'm going to come to Stephen in a second, but my first comment would be this is where you have to start to take control of your, what energy you're using generation wise. If you've got your usage right to the bottom, then it's about what can you do to take control of that generation, so you're not at the whim of the people pumping it into you. What do you say, Steve?
I was going to say that it does, if you've got down to as low as you can go, it's then what opportunities do you have to generate energy yourself. And like I say, that at the moment there are lots of different initiatives to encourage businesses to start looking at renewable on-site generation, whether that's through formal standard loans through the high street banks, or that, like I said, there are a number of investment funds that are they're looking for roofs, they're looking for businesses to put photovoltaics on. So at the moment, I would say start looking around about looking for your own generation of electricity.
Yeah, try and buffer yourself, even if it's just buffering your usage against your peaks of energy use. That might be the most expensive time of the day. All those sorts of things. Often your DNO, now is it district? I always get DNO wrong, Stephen. What does DNO stand?
Distribution network operator.
Your distribution network operator. So in other words, if you're in the northwest of England, it's Electricity Northwest. So they have, all of them around the country have lots of schemes for helping people also sort of drive down their usage or look at ways of generating on site as well. So look at and see what you can do to generate on your site if you've got to the bare bones of what you can use.
But also, as I mentioned earlier, they're quite keen that if you can actually move your load to a different time of the day, that helps the network out at peak periods. So that's what I'm saying about, if you understand where you're actually consuming your energy and at what times, then you actually have more of a chance to,
and you can get
use
a lower
it to your
energy
advantage.
Bill. Yeah, you can get a lower energy bill that way. If you're as old as I am, then it's like economy 7. It's moving your usage to the out of peak hours time that you get a better deal. So it's nearly past. Thank you very much for everyone who's been here. Thank you to Ed and Chris and Stephen, and especially Shelley, to give us a picture from the businesses. Please go on to the zerocarbonbusiness.uk site, find it, look at it, tell us what's wrong with it, tell us when you want to use it or don't want to use it. Oh, thank you, Lynn Tracy. Flexible services from Electricity Northwest in the chat now. There's the link. Matthew, grab that. And we will look to see you again soon. We'll send round the slides and also the link to the recording. So it's been really good to see you all, and we'll see you again soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.